22, 17.
Hey, I don't count that high, all right? That wasn't on the infantry test. So, all right. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. And Doc likes to count out of order because, that's science or something. So without further ado, we're going to introduce our guest, Ms. Jody Lynn Nye. So can you please introduce yourself to people who might not have heard of you?
Hi, I'm Jody Lynn Nye. I write science fiction and fantasy novels and short stories. I have been a book reviewer and I have taught science fiction. I teach the 2-day writers workshop at DragonCon every year. That's in Atlanta on Labor Day weekend. I'm one of the writer judges for the Writers of the Future contest. That's the largest speculative fiction contest in the world. And I have had a many and varied career with some extremely lucky breaks.
All right. So the next part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we first found them. So I actually found Jody through Cisca. We were planning an episode talking about the importance of book reviews. And as Jody mentioned, she used to be a professional book reviewer. So we were trying to make that happen. That episode didn't pan out for scheduling reasons because, people in their day jobs. It's still been prepped and we will still host that someday. But that was how we first got introduced to her. But Doc, I imagine that was not how you first met Jody. So can you tell us that story?
It was not, actually. So I the first time I came across her was as an author. But then when I met Jody, the person, I was at DragonCon doing dinner with a friend and Jody came up, joined us for dinner, and I got introduced, and I did not realize it was Jody Lynn Nye, which is probably for the best because otherwise I would have flipped out because I have loved her work forever. And she does some amazing stories. She does some of the best humor I've ever read. So I would have flipped out and completely not have eaten my dinner and had a fangasm and meltdown. So, in fact, it was very funny because the person afterwards, I went, it would be really cool. I heard Jody Lynn Nye is going to be at this convention to meet her. And he goes, you just had dinner with her. And I went, you didn't tell me that. You told me this is, yes, I did. I went, no, you said this is Jody. Not this is the Jody. So, in perspective, that was the first night I'd ever been at a convention. I'd been at a DragonCon for less than 5 hours.
So writing humor is one thing. Writing it well is a completely different thing. I've written exactly one humor story, and I said, no, thank you, never again. So anybody that can do it on a reoccurring basis, I have much respect for.
That's because you don't have a sense of humor. You just have a warped thing the army put in its place.
I actually was submitting it to an anthology of humor, and I sent it the first 2,000 words to the publisher, and I'm like, is this army humor a little too much? And he goes, yeah, we might have to make this one a little bit higher rated for this kind of. So I ended up publishing it myself after I got a co-writer help me tone down the barracks humor. But when you're trying to make everything have multiple meanings, that's just a lot of thinking. So do you do that when you write humor? Do you try to make things like have layered meanings, or do you just go with slapstick on the top?
Oh, I do not just go with slapstick. Slapstick is one of the facets of humor, but it's by no means the only one, and certainly not the only one I use. Sometimes I bury jokes in my work that some people have never ever mentioned, but I'm happy that they're there. But for the most part, it's layers, it's different kinds, it's different facets, and some things like Humpty Dumpty paying his words to mean what he wants them to. Some jokes do double duty.
See, that's where it gets hard because you have to think too much, and I don't like thinking anymore. If I wanted to think, I would have joined the infantry. I know you were waiting for that, Doc. But all right, ask her the religion questions, and we get to see if she gets to stay.
She'll get to stay because she's right, you're wrong. So.
Oh crap! I gave you the ability to kick me out of the show now too. I'm in trouble.
So for our sci-fi movie selection tonight, we have Galaxy Quest, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or Spaceballs.
What's the question?
Did I freeze?
You have to pick the religion. Which one do you like more?
Wow. Well, I have a soft spot for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but I think that Galaxy Quest was nearly perfect, so it has to be Galaxy Quest.
It's definitely withstood the test of time and graphics even. So now for our fantasy religion question of pick the movie. Last Action Hero, Bewitched, or Ghosts of Girlfriends Past? I've never even heard of the last one. JR must have clearly picked it.
Well,
Google for the win.
If you're going to go with Bewitched, the sitcom of the 1960s, I would have to say that. But
that would count.
What?
You can say the 1960s Bewitched. That will work.
Okay.
I left that open to which Bewitched you watched because people came at it at different times. And if you were listening and not watching, she just did the patented no shake.
I could not do that.
I thought that
my head would fall off.
Discovery was a terrific character, and her mother, amazing.
Did she actually do the nose shake, or was that like CGI of the era? That's what I need to know.
No, she did that.
She did that.
I can't make my nose move that way. It might fall off, so that's impressive.
Oh.
Okay. All right, moving on, Doc. Save me from my...
Okay, so which was your first love, though? Sci-fi or fantasy?
Oh, where do comic books fall into that?
It depends on the content. There's sci-fi comic books, and then there's fantasy comic books.
I suppose it has to have been fantasy then, because superheroes are fantasy, whatever you may say. And I started reading comic books at a very early age. My grandfather bought me my first Gold Key comics when I was 4, and that started a lifelong love. I kept on buying them many years into my upper childhood until I really couldn't afford them anymore. When they jumped to 35 cents, that was already a problem. And then when they went to dollars, my poor starving student person couldn't keep up my habit.
Well, and comic books for me are kind of like mangas. You just devour them so fast.
Yes. Yep.
So, and $7 for a 350-page book is great because it keeps me busy for at least a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read as fast as my mother. It would keep her busy for a day. But so you kind of told us, but I've never heard of the Gold Key comics, because normally we ask what was your first memory of speculative fiction, but I don't.
It almost has to be that. Although I was reading golden books, little golden books when I was a small child. And my favorite, according to my mother, was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which I could recite back to her at about a year old. So it has fantasy dating all the way back. And Gold Key comics were things like Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. So they were extremely innocent. They're very, very suitable for small children. And my grandfather was giving me those in front of my mother, along with things like classic comics. I read Ivanhoe as a comic book long before I knew that it was a huge book by Sir Walter Scott. Nice. And then gradually got into superheroes, DC and Marvel, and all of those things. They were there waiting for me.
It's kind of an appropriate answer given the month that it is. 'Tis the season and all. Although we were talking about that with my oldest today, or this weekend, and he's decided that Santa is actually an extortion racket against parents and that Santa is a mafiosa. So somebody needs to write that story, because I'd probably read it. It sounds hilarious. All right.
Bad Santa.
That's what I told him to write it.
Yeah. No.
You need to. Don't let Michael read it.
No.
He'll get ideas.
All right. So what is it you love about the umbrella of speculative fiction?
Not being here in this time in this place when I was a kid. Years ago, I was at an American Booksellers Association conference, and Lois Bujold was making a talk for the librarians assembled, and she was quoting a study that she had read about Type A and Type B readers. Type A readers read stories about things that could happen to people like them, taking place in the here and the now, with the same sort of problems that could befall people like themselves. And Type B readers read anything but. And as a matter of fact, Type B readers read 6 to 8 times as many books as type A readers anyhow.
Probably because they're having more fun.
Well, it's things that wouldn't necessarily happen to you, but you could wish that they were. There were a lot of wish fulfillment books, and I am a type B reader.
Is there a type C that'll read both?
I'm sorry?
Is there like a type C that'll read both, or type D and they'll throw in like the nonfiction?
Oh, I am talking about fiction only here. You can
Okay,
read as
okay.
much nonfiction as you want, but
Okay.
type A readers tend to read stories about people like themselves and things that could befall them.
Okay.
I am
All
not
right,
that
so
kind of reader. I don't want to
I
read
will on
about somebody
occasion.
like me.
That
But you're right. I
very
tend to.
fun.
Yeah, that's not as exciting. But I am also the boring guy that would pay for JSTORs just to read the stuff myself. So, all right. So, how did your love of science? Don't look at me like that, Doc. I can see you judging me. They're judgy eyes. So, how did your love of speculative fiction as a genre transition into you writing stories in that space?
Oh, I've been writing stories since I could write. I was telling stories before I could write. So that was not actually a transition. That was just a continuation of my life. I would tell stories to my brothers, to my cousins, and when I went away to sleepaway camp, I would tell stories at night because we didn't have a television. And I would tell stories in the dark after they turned out the lights. So I was kind of the entertainment for my cabin. And that just continued on. When I could write, I started making my own little books out of my dad's office paper. I was also my own publisher and illustrator. So please God, let none of these things still exist. I would be so shattered if any of these turned up. But I was proud of them at the time.
All right. So many authors let their own real life experiences influence the sort of stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments that shape you as a storyteller?
No, I just started imagining things. I think my best friend and I used to make believe together. We picked out things that we wanted to have happen and just sort of imagined them into being. And some of them were gloriously tragic, and some of them were just total wish fulfillment. So I suppose in a way that was as close as I come to that.
So the Bridge to Terabithia could have been written about you as a young child, minus the dying.
Yeah, minus the dying.
Maybe.
Have you not read that book?
I have read it, and
Okay.
not a favorite. I think it's good.
Doc.
What?
I kind of preferred the portal fiction of the Chronicles of Narnia, to be honest.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer. You were wounding my soul, but Doc, you're gonna keep this going. Ask the next question.
Okay, so fandom questions.
Yeah.
Have you had any cool art or somebody cosplay one of your characters yet?
Why, yes. As a matter of fact, your very own youngest brother cosplayed one of my wonderful characters. Yes. And he did a great job of it. James was a fantastic Lord Thomas Canago. I thought it was awesome. And he threw in little bits and pieces of his own. So I was very, very honored.
It very much blended into the character. I think they're two peas in a pod.
No, he was tremendous. I've also had a group in Chicago who cosplayed the Myth Adventures characters, including one fellow who painted himself green to play Oz.
Oh my goodness.
That was great. They were terrific. I'm still in touch with those people. They're really nice.
That's awesome. It's wonderful. It is a lot. That's a lot. You didn't break me. Okay. As somebody asked for your autograph out in public, away from a convention, maybe a book signing or library,
bookstores, libraries, that kind of thing. When I talk at schools, sometimes I'm always very flattered because I have to say I never expect anyone to know who I am. So I don't look like the words on a page.
So you mentioned talking at school. So is that something you do a lot of? Like go to school libraries? We talking like colleges?
I will do it. I will do it. The libraries that were in Northern Illinois, where I come from, frequently had events where they would invite a local author, or they would get in touch and say, "Are you close enough to come to this event?" And I'd say, "Sure, I'm happy to come to that if there's a book fair or something," because I find that if you talk to people, they get a chance to get to know you a little bit. They're more interested in reading your work. But anything that I can do to get people actually reading books, I will happily do.
Okay.
Well, all reading's amazing. So, and you're always so sweet with kids and fans when they come up. So,
if you are not nice to your fans, you do not deserve to have any.
I have said that about people before too. I got told I was mean when I said it, but I don't have fans, so it's maybe that's why. I don't know.
Well, I have watched some fellow pros who shall remain extremely nameless be very rude to their fans, and I don't get it.
You can sometimes catch people in a bad moment.
Oh, well, of course,
But,
there's that.
yeah.
But if all things being equal, if you are not busy, if you are just sitting at a table, or if you are just passing through, it takes nothing to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't, instead of get out of my way.
Yeah, that would be not a great way of saying it. But on to the positive.
Yep.
Have you spotted someone reading your book out in the wild?
I have. I was just, trembling. Should I say something? Should I not say something? I didn't say something. But it was a nice moment.
That's got to be really fun, though, to see.
Oh, it is. It's great.
And then what is your weirdest or funniest fan interaction that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, boy. Well, you took the one of the ones since it actually happened to you. One of the times I was at Dragon Con and I was in the Walk of Fame. I was talking to a celebrity that I liked, and very, very nice man. And all of the celebrities who come to Dragon Con are assigned a minder, somebody to go, get food for them or get drinks for them, to get the correct spelling of somebody's name for the photographs that they're selling, and so on. And while I was talking to this nice gentleman, his minder said to me, "Oh, I love your work." And next to him was another celebrity, and he said, "Oh, what does she write?" And I got passed down the line.
That's awesome.
And I chatted with him for a little bit, and he turned to his minder and said, "Give her a signed photograph." And I had an extra book on me, so I gave it to him. That was fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was very cool.
So for most of our audience, we target readers, not other authors. There's plenty of How to Be an Author podcast. But if you are aspiring to be an author, let that show you. Keep a book on you of yours, because you never know when you want to trade with famous people who want a copy.
Absolutely. So I hope he enjoyed it.
Outstanding. So, Doc, do you want to tell the story where you met her? You want to squee out one more time? So, do you want to tell the story? So, did you want to tell us how you met her so you could squee out one more time? Or are you good?
I'm good. JR's liking doing this because I don't do that very often.
So this is the part of the interview, dear listener, where we talk about everything Miss Jody Lynn has written, which I realize it's a long list, Jody. So could you give us like the Reader's Digest version of your body of work? And I have linked to your Wikipedia, which has your bibliography. So if you're really curious, people, you can go check it out.
Well, the Reader's Digest version, I started out in writing game materials for Mayfair Games. I was writing modules for them, and from there I transitioned into writing Choose Your Own Adventures for tour books that were in a licensed series called Crossroads, in which the organizer, who was at the time my fiance and is now my husband, Bill Fawcett, licensed known science fiction and fantasy works such as The Wizard in Spite of Himself, Xanth, the Dragon Riders of Pern, Roger Zelazny's Trumps, and so on. And I wrote 4 Choose Your Own Adventures for the Crossroads series. From there, I also did a couple of guides to fantasy and science fiction worlds, namely Pern and Xanth. And at the same time, I was selling my first novels to Warner Books. And my first fantasy and my first science fiction, which happened to be a collaboration with Anne McCaffrey, came out the same month. Technically, 2 adjacent months, but it so happened that they really actually hit the bookstore at the same time. Since then, I have written a total of around 55 books. I've published a total of around that many books. 3 of them are anthologies, or actually collection. No, one of them's a collection. 2 of them are anthologies. And some fantasy series, some science fiction series, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I've written a ton of short stories, about 175 at this point.
I stopped counting at 50 people when I was going through the list.
There's a lot of them out there, and I really love writing short stories. Many of my novelist friends do not like writing short stories. They consider them a waste of time, but I really enjoy it, and I like having something that I can actually finish, because books take a few months. So
I enjoy short content too, so it's always nice to find people who appreciate that. So I do have a question. So you did mention that you wrote the Choose Your Own Adventure or whatever comment path. So I've looked at those as, because I read those as a kid and I loved them. And now I look at them and I think about how I would write them. And even with a modern word processor, like I'm picturing scenes with like a serial killer, like you've got the strings everywhere, trying to figure out how to make everything connect. So how crazy did it drive you trying to organize that when you were writing that?
Not at all. You see, you don't write it all scrambled up. You write it as a story, and then at the turning points, you write the conclusions, the absolute fail, the if this then that, and the success keep going answers. Sometimes there can be 2 to 5 different branches off a main thread. One of them will always lead to failure. And for that, the Crossroads series had section 29, the absolute failure, the character loses and goes home, or dies tragically or something like that. And it was always section 29 throughout all 14 of the books in the series.
That's awesome.
I remember that with that. The first time I got the Crossroad book, I didn't understand it was a Choose Your Own Adventure book. And I read it straight through. Oh. And then I remember, it was a very confusing moment, or moments. But I remember actually getting out a pad of paper, so I worked out all the permutations and read them, all of the permutations.
Many people
would, because you're a super nerd.
It's okay, JR. I'm okay with being a super nerd.
Well, I wrote it in order, and then I mixed it up. I have a chart with each one, and I put both of the numbers in the little bubble designating which section that is. I had to explain it to Anne McCaffrey when I wrote the first one that is set in Pern, which was called Dragon Harper.
Yes.
And I told her exactly what I was doing, but she didn't quite understand it. So I wrote her an 8-page Choose Your Own Adventure, which shall go down in history, because it was called Robinson Hits the Sauce, where her favorite character, Master Robinson, goes to a gather at Bendon Hold, and party's a little too hard, and the failure is when he pretty much has to sleep it off at Bendon Weir, because he can't get a dragon to take him back to Harper Hall. Nice. So I didn't realize the thing still existed. After Anne passed away, Todd went through her things and he found it and he gave it back to me.
Oh, so, wow.
What was her reaction?
I wrote it. What
was her reaction when she realized what you were doing, when she understood the concept of Choose Your Own
Adventure? She loved it. She thought it was great fun. Anne had a great mind. She understood what I was doing. I left her stuff. I explained to her exactly where she needed to go to get the success story and what it looked like with the failure and how many permutations of the story that it could go through. And she liked the idea because it had limited playability, because once you've gone through all the combinations, well, you read it again if you like it, but you know where to go after that.
Right. Okay. So All right. Well, all of that sounds fascinating. Today, we're here to talk about the Strong Arm Tactics, which is book 1 of the Wolfpack series. So, where did you come up with the premise for this series? Was it psychedelics, the Ouija board, overindulging in Georgia peaches? So how'd you get the idea for
The
Strong Arm
publisher
Tactics?
asked me to. The publisher asked me to. I wrote it for Misha Merlin for Steve Pagel, who was the publisher then. And we were discussing things that I could do for him. He was bringing in some of the books that I had written that no longer had a home because the editor left the publishing house. And when the contract expired, I withdrew the rights.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking and I said, what don't you have that you would like? And he said, well, I don't have any military stuff. And I said, how would you feel about a humorous military series? And he said, great. So I let him have that.
I love this book.
So, is it a standalone, or did the rest of the series make it?
It was always meant to be a series, but Misha Merlin went under, and it sat idle for a few years, and then Wordfire Press picked it up, and I've been in negotiation to do more. I had 3 others plotted out, so working on getting that done. I'd really like to go on with it because it was fun.
That's always a good sign.
It very much was fun, and I loved it. And there was actually a soldier I knew in the army who reminded me of the character.
Of which one? A thing or a bad thing, Doc?
So we'll get into some of what reminded me. I knew a soldier who he was the only member of in his family who did not go into the mafia. So
I've met a few of those. All right.
Yeah. And so, but it's just funny because you don't think about that. And I will let Jody talk about her characters.
Well, we'll get there because we do talk about the characters. But before we dig into the novel itself, we're going to take a moment and enjoy that glorious cover. So what's the story of this? Did you have any say in the creation of the art, or they just sort of give it to you? And is the one that we found the original cover, or is this what Wordfire Press put on?
This is the cover. I own that painting. It is downstairs in my husband's office.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's tremendous. Don Mates is my favorite cover artist, and he does incredible work. I've had at least 7 books illustrated by him. He does wonderful work. When my first fantasy was coming out, Brian Thompson, who was my editor at the time, wonderful man, I miss him still, was in a panel, and he said, we'll have lunch afterwards, and I want to discuss some things with you. And I've picked out an artist for your first book. I want to show it to you. Well, we wandered through the art show waiting for Brian to come out, and we stopped in front of Don's display, and I saw Don's painting 40 Thieves, which is a pirate ship with the most disreputable characters on board that you can imagine. It's a great painting. Don does great pirates. He did the Captain Morgan rum ad, so you can probably...
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, he does the pirate.
Right. So Brian came along and said, oh, you found it. This is the artist I thought of for your first book, Mythology 101. So thus began a lifelong love. I think he's perfect for my sort of stuff. So Steve wanted to use Don, and in fact, I think had already used him for something else. Negotiated with him, worked it out, and these are the 2 officers fighting it out on Wingle World, which is a planet-sized amusement park.
I got that theme, and I'm digging the cover. So we're gonna move on to the book itself. So what would your 30-second elevator pitch for this novel be?
Punishment detail is given what looks like a cream puff assignment and turns out to be anything but. And humor ensues.
I will have to check out the audiobook and hope it's still there. All right, Doc. Stop giggling.
I can't. I giggle every time I go through this one. So, I know what makes this special, but can you tell us what makes this book stand out, particularly amongst military sci-fi?
Well, the fact that it's funny, for one thing. And I talked to a lot of service people and retired service people to get what they thought was funny. And naturally, like anything else, I had to dampen it down a little bit because for the general public. But there's quite a bit of unadulterated military humor in there. I know some people who had just great stories to tell, and I incorporated what I learned from them, how they really live. Everything can be very, very boring, and then until suddenly it isn't.
Yes.
And army buddies are like anyone else with whom you have experienced an adrenaline-inducing event. Nobody else can understand it but you. There's a whole lot of you had to be there. You can tell the no shit, there I was stories all you want, but it never has the same impact as it does for somebody with whom you actually lived it.
That's very true. And the best of those kind of stories, generally, you have to be drunk to tell. So, and since we're all sober, we're going to let Doc ask the next question. But I'm assuming you're sober, Doc.
What? Huh? We don't talk about that. Oh, so I love this. This is a tropalicious question, which is, what tropes do you feel like you really took and used, and which ones do you feel you kind of put on their side?
Say that again.
Which tropes did you use in this book, and which ones did you take and be like, I like this trope, but let's turn it around and do it 180?
Oh, well, one of them absolutely has to be the officer coming into sort of an established environment and thinking that he has to shake it up only to find himself shaken up. But in reality, and also the punishment detail turning out to be tremendously effective in their own wacky way. So I suppose that those are two fairly common tropes, but I like them. I think they work just fine.
I know that I think sometimes the most interesting results are when the commander just says, go do, and then they're like, wait, I didn't think you'd actually do this, or how did you do this?
Well, in this case, they've managed to make things happen before. So how do I care how you get there as long as you get there?
They call that plausible deniability, folks.
Exactly. If I didn't see it happen, it didn't happen.
They even have a saying in rugby, if the sir didn't see it, it didn't happen.
JR loves his rugby stories. It's about the only sport he actually understands.
This is true.
So
well, I understand NASCAR, you just drive in circles. Right? That's
I'm
all there
not
is
really
to it, I think.
sure that that's a sport.
I don't know. It's on the sports
TV. It is channel, competitive, but it is not athletic.
Then again, they put poker on the sports. Anyway, I digress. Let's continue.
Anyway, before we get people sending us hate mail, so what JR loves to have me ask this because he knows I hate subgenres, but what subgenres do you feel this fits into?
This is humorous military science fiction. I mean, it's hard to get much more sub than that. It's futuristic. But it's military, but it's funny, and that is a very small subgroup.
Fair. All right, Doc. You did your penance today. You can ask your fun questions.
So I have been asking some of the fun questions. So what? Tell us about the main character. We see him on the book cover, but can you tell us a bit more about him?
Well, Wolf is not even the oldest child in his family, but his father wants him to come back and join the family business. He does not want to be involved in the family business. Despite the fact that they have a lot of legitimate businesses throughout the galaxy, he still doesn't like the origins of the family wealth and so on. He wants to do good across the galaxy, but discovers, in fact, that he has to fall back on what his father and his grandfather and great-grandmother and the ancestors going all the way back developed in order to become, to make his mission work and to be effective. He occasionally needs to fall back on what he did learn in the family. It isn't all bad because the family is loyal to itself and to the people that depend upon it. This is let's be honest, glorified mafiosi that they don't attack non-combatants, and the word given is kept. So he's honorable. He's absolutely honorable. And he's rejecting the family business, hoping to make his own way in the world, hoping that as a wolf, people think of him as himself and not as a member of his family. Although, and since you asked about him, his mother is a famous TV host for very young children. So people, when they see her, they go back to being 4 years old again. And he admires her very much, but in her own way, she's just as tough as Dad.
So in his prime, could
the second book was going to be, is going to be, it's going to include her in it, and I'm looking forward to that.
So would De Niro fit if they made this when he was younger in the film adaptation?
Why would De Niro be in it?
He did The Goodfellas, the iconic gangster movie.
Uh-huh. Actually, he doesn't look like Dad at all, so no, maybe not.
All right, Doc. I'm trying here. I don't have a lot of cultural references. I read too much and watched too little TV.
Well,
remember,
here's the thing. Inevitably,
not all
most of
were
the
Italian.
best actors. Yes, but inevitably, most of the truly amazing sci-fi fantasy roles were done by not huge named actors. Doc.
You froze. I couldn't understand that.
Getting huge named actors, I think, kind of backfires when you're casting for a lot of sci-fi and fantasy.
It depends. I think that Robert De Niro as fearless leader just delighted me no end.
I'm not sure I've seen that one.
He was in Rocky and Bullwinkle with the live action movie.
I didn't watch that.
Oh, okay.
Movie. Now I know what I'm doing this weekend.
The humor is right on your age level.
Thanks. I'm glad you appreciate it. It's like you do know me.
Say that. So can you tell us about some of the standout secondary characters that are in this book? Because you never skimp on your characters.
The two master sergeants, who also happen to be lovers, are great characters. And it has been long enough that I have forgotten their names, except Emmy, who's also called Ammo, is tiny and tough. They're all very tough. They've had a lot to put up with, and they simply cannot be mustered out. There's no good excuse for it. The punishment detail is supposed to be punishment enough.
Yeah.
They're just bad enough that nobody wants them in their unit, but they're tremendously effective as non-com officers. And they've been keeping this group together long enough that they have become a very weird kind of family, like any other group that's been thrown together long enough. Maybe dysfunctional family, but family nevertheless.
I think after I read this early on in my military career, and then I read it afterwards, and it jived very strongly with me because you do have that platoon or that squad, and they're like, yeah, we really but they seem to have just embraced the moniker of being the punishment group, and they go with it, and they just do things, and then they do really amazing things, and then you just really hope you never have to know how they did it.
Don't want to know. Do not want to know.
Yeah, I was famous for looking at people and going, well, you see, there's this phrase called "don't ask, don't tell," and it applies to more than one topic. And they went, just shut up, Small. Go. And they just walk away.
Right.
Again,
let's see.
Plausible deniability.
I also have someone who is a clone, and she is the latest in the line of someone who wanted immortality, and the gene line has been maintained, even though the personality doesn't go along with it. You even if you have the same genes, you're not necessarily going to behave the same way. You're not going to have the memories.
Yeah.
So I felt tremendously sorry for this character because she also, just like Wolf was trying to make her own way in the universe. But one of my favorites is Jones, who's the engineer. He comes from a planet where everybody is named Jones. It's Jones' planet. And he is the one who is responsible for the dirtiest limericks in the book.
He's funny.
Were you inspired by George?
Hmm?
Were you inspired by George Foreman naming all of his kids George, even the girls?
No, I was not. I think George Foreman is a tremendously interesting guy. And if you have never seen Better Late Than Never, you should.
I feel bad for his daughters.
I hope they had excellent middle names. But at least they can afford the therapy, Doc. So are there any bad guys that your characters have to confront without giving away any spoilers? Is there anything you could tell us about the bad guys?
The bad guys want the same thing that the good guys do. They're just a lot more vicious about it, and they are not constrained by rules of engagement or Army regulations, Space Marine regulations. So they are out to get what they want, and I do not want to give things away because it's part of the plot. So I think they're nasty and vicious, and they ought to be someone that you dislike.
Okay, so speaking of characters, if yours ever met you in a back alley, how do you think that would fare, given the kind of hell authors put their characters through? Would you get a hug, a punch in the face, or something in between?
I'd have to buy them all a drink. No question about that. If I suddenly recognized who I was face-to-face with, it's, let's go to the bar.
You can never go wrong with a good bar. Just don't tell my shrink I said that.
And I would just have to, pat my credit card and say, don't cry, it'll be over soon.
All right. So finally, what can you tell us about the universe? So in miniseries, the worlds where the stories take place are as much a character as the antagonist or protagonist. So what can you tell us about this place the story is set?
Well, the Thousandth Worlds Confederation is humanity has grown out as far as it can. There are alien races, but they've most of the problems that they run into are with fellow humans, and they are out to battle against the enemies of Earth, and it's colleagues. So really down at the level where my Space Marines are, spacers I call them, it's above their pay grade. But there are television programs or the equivalent thereof. There's the internet. There are people falling in love. There are businesses. There are people exploring new planets, new worlds, renovating fallen colonies, and so on. So it's a busy place. And there are missions to be done, which is how my people end up doing their work. They get the things that are not supposed to have any glory attached to them. So as I said, it's above their pay grade.
Excellent answer as a soldier. Just they don't pay me enough to care. So Strong Arm Tactics is part of a series. You've mentioned that it says so in the title, and you mentioned that you intended it to be, and it will be at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. So how expansive is this series going to be? Are you going to be a trilogy and it's done? Are you going to try to compete with Weber for the most books in one single universe? How do you see this going?
I had plotted out 4 books. They got shelved because of the problem with the original publishing house, and all I ask is that it carry on and look as good as the first one did. I mean, Steve did me proud. To have a Don Mates cover, to have beautiful production values. That's all I want for the next one as well. And I will do what I can to make it a worthy story. The honor that I have been paid by a number of service people who have read it and said, I loved this. This reminded me of blank person I was in a unit with, etc., is really a tribute. And if I ever have, if I get the opportunity to write another one, which I do intend to, I have a lot of new people to ask questions of and say, okay, tell me what happened if ever something like this happened, or what did your sergeant or your master sergeant or your chief do when this kind of thing happened in the unit? And that is always a fruitful conversation. Even if I don't use exactly their story, I get great ideas from what they do tell me.
So is the cover artist around to make the subsequent covers as well?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Okay, because
I think
it's
he's only
sometimes
a couple
jarring
years
when
older than I am, so I wish him
perfect.
a very long career. He's wonderful.
Sometimes when they switch artists midstream, it can be jarring because the look just isn't the same. So,
I know
and
an
that cover
artist
is too perfect.
who does similar work, but I like Don better.
You can't go wrong because that's a glorious cover.
It is a glorious cover. I think I can identify which ones of her other covers he's done as well, just because I'm familiar with the work.
In the middle, you see the mascot of Wingle World. That's Bunny Hug, who is a 9-foot pink bunny, and it is supposed to be a little cloying looking because it is for 6-year-olds.
And if you have ever been creeped out by Chucky whatever the thing is from Chuck E. Cheese, you'll love what happens.
And I like, I like the art. If you check out like the blasters in this hip and the rifles they're using, that has that sort of 1950s sci-fi aesthetic to them that I really like.
So I love it.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I thought it turned out just amazingly well. I laughed myself sick when I first saw the art.
That's amazing.
He's always like that. He always surprises me with tremendously detailed, wonderful work.
So did the picture continue for the wraparound? Because I grabbed the ebook copy and I didn't see the paperback.
No, this is all there is. This is it.
Okay. That's a glorious picture. All right, Doc. I could drool forever, but you got to save us from ourselves or it'll get boring real quick.
So I'm familiar with your work, and I know that you always keep things very consistent internally within your science or magic when you're doing fantasy. So what sort of tech can you tell our readers to expect out of these books?
What sort of tech?
Yeah.
Well, one of the most important things about anything that the military has to deal with is that the parts need to be interchangeable. Otherwise, they're going to be useless, because when something goes wrong, if you can't slot in another part, then you have lost that piece of equipment. And really, the simpler, the better. So something that can be recharged from main power. And the problem that most service people run into is the same one that people run into now, is the food. This was conceived at a time when I was talking to a friend who had gone to Desert Storm, and he talked about being stuck with the worst MREs, which in these books I call merds, or merds, as in the French word for excrement, because some of them were really terrible, and people traded hard to try and get the good tasting ones. It so happens that my friend, who is an armorer who makes both edged weapons and makes guns, he had a particular favorite, which was not favored by the unit that he went in with. He was going in as a contractor at Desert Storm, and he had great stories to tell about it. And that was the first time that I learned that MREs now come with tiny bottles of Tabasco sauce with them. And tremendous trade goods. If you didn't like Tabasco sauce, you could probably trade for a candy bar or something else that somebody else was willing to give just to get some more flavor in their food. So the whole MRE situation becomes important in strong arm tactics. And like I said, anything that's the simplest, the better, so that something doesn't go wrong with it. But something can always go wrong.
So Doc, when you were in, did you have a favorite or least favorite MRE?
Yes, I did.
What was yours?
I would say that I like most of the vegetarians were pretty good as long as it wasn't the vegetarian omelet.
Oh, they called it the vomlet. It was disgusting. It's
No,
my
but the
worst
other
one.
thing that was
We gotta fix
hilarious
her
about
Wi-Fi.
it is
freezing up.
the vegetarian omelet comes with hash browns, but the hash browns have
Oh,
bacon in them.
yum.
Yeah.
But it's in a vegetarian MRE.
I'd forgotten that. You're right.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
I would say my favorite one was the quote tuna salad, which before anybody gags, understand it. The reason it worked was because it was the one that had the least to do with the army. Because when you opened it up, it was sun-kissed tuna, and then it had all these other like rich crackers and other things. None of it was made by the army.
I like the
The army
chili
didn't
mac.
cook it.
I like the chili mac. That was my favorite.
So
I know that people like the chicken a la king, and they like the meatloaf, and then there were some that they just did not want to go anywhere near.
I did not like
Yeah.
the meatloaf. I liked
I
the
did not like the
chicken and
meatloaf.
dumplings.
I don't think I ever got
The
that
chicken
one.
and dumplings, yeah. That I think that was Kevin's favorite.
The beef stew is pretty good, but
Hard to mess up beef stew, though, to be fair.
yes, but yeah, it can happen. But I actually my fellows in my unit discovered that the a lot of the proteins didn't agree with my stomach, and so it was much better for everybody else if I had just stuck with the vegetarians.
Okay.
Fair.
So I ate a lot of the vegetarian. The vegetarian lasagna was pretty good, and ravioli.
We bought a lot from the PXs when we were in Iraq, so we could cook on our own and not have to live off the MREs because they were horrific to your body. And then we learned to cook on an engine block. So I don't want to think about the probable future cancer I get from the things that were cooked on those engines. It's better not to think about it.
Yeah, no, but I always had lots of stuff to trade because I did not eat the Tabasco sauce. So I didn't particularly care for it, which meant I always had people willing to give me stuff for it.
I understand that
just
the
need
brownie
it.
was hot trade goods.
Yes, the brownie was good.
They used to do a chocolate protein bar that was actually really good.
Yeah, I remember that. Somehow they messed up the combos though because they were like generic and like tasted like cardboard. I don't know how they did that.
I don't know because combos kind of taste like that.
No, they don't. You bite your tongue. All right, Doc. We're gonna get into arguments about food, so let's get back on track.
And none of which you can
Clearly
eat
uncultured farm. What's that?
None of which you can eat on your diet, anyways, JR.
This is probably why I'm getting hangry. So we'll move on.
So, of all the tech in your book, is there any you'd take and use for daily life now?
I would love to have the data card that Die Wolf carries on his chest because it is a supercomputer that is even beyond what we're using now.
So, how would you abuse it for daily if you had it?
It would become a permanent repository for files that I don't want to lose. Things can happen even to solid state drives.
Yeah.
But this is made to go through everything. I mean, he showers with it.
So she actually is the one who's abusing tech by doing good things. So she clearly doesn't fit in with you, Nick, and I, because we were like, we'd get a lightsaber and cut people's feet off just for the fun of it. We had all kinds of horrific ideas.
Oh.
All right. So
you'd asked about this book. I have other tech that I would maintain from other books, but talking about this one, I have no use for most of the things that the unit uses because not a military person.
But there's some really cool animatronic like things that they have in this book that are kind of cool.
I enjoyed coming up with that, and I have watched puppeteers because there are puppeteers on this planet, run several marionettes at a time. And I was just fascinated by the concept. So that kind of fed into it.
Okay.
Were
I
you
want to really read this.
It is really great. Were you inspired by the tunnels that they have underneath Disney World for some of this?
Yep, that's part of it. I also knew that underneath several of the universities that I have toured and attended, also the ones that my husband went to, had steam tunnels that you could get into if you knew how.
Oh, wow.
And Bill knew all the ones under Western Illinois University. They keep blocking them, but people who know how to get into them probably know access points that the current administration has no idea about. But I did know that there are many, many, many tunnels underneath the Disney properties so that the character people can escape into them and that the security can pop up suddenly if they are needed. It's just amazingly quick access. So I thought this could be a lot of fun. This is running on more than one level in literal and figurative sense.
It shows that you did a bunch of research into how some of the amusement parks do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
And
I was able to visit the tunnels underneath an amusement park, not a Disney property, and it's just very cool. There's also, as you probably know, one tunnels that run underneath the Senate office buildings, the government office buildings in Washington.
Yeah, there's original Civil War fortifications they used for emergency escape, or they did before helicopter technology got better.
Yep, but now they still use the little rail cars, so it's cool.
That's pretty cool. All right, Doc, you get to ask your favorite question.
So there are a lot of my favorite questions, and I get to ask all of them that I want to. I share with you when I deem it right. So you said that we have aliens in this universe, but it's been a while since I read the book. I don't really remember them playing a huge part, but how do you go about designing your aliens when you do design an alien? Is it
there's the cat person. He would be much happier wearing like kind of overalls. But I wanted to tell a story about people, and of course all aliens are people. They just are more interested in their own lives than in ours, and they're going to perceive things differently. So it's fun to explore that. But mostly I was talking about the cohesiveness of group that had to be together because they didn't have a choice. And it was either that or go home or back to whatever life they had before that. And a lot of people become career military because they find a
fulfillment.
Simpatico there. Yes, a fulfillment that they don't find in their civilian life. And some of these people, like Jones, has been there. He could probably retire. He could probably claim his 20 or his 30, but he doesn't have any reason to go back. Whereas he despite the fact that it's the punishment detail, he feels useful there. He feels comfortable.
Okay, that's a good answer. So for punishment detail, does that mean they also get like the literal shit burning details, or is it just the missions nobody wants?
Missions nobody wants. Because literally they've been removed from their previous postings. And that is supposed to be punishment enough, but they're still given assignments. It's just usually the ones that are going to be difficult or dull or both.
Dull is a good thing. You don't appreciate that when you're young, but dull is a good thing.
Right.
All right. So clearly this interview is winding down, but was there anything about strong arm tactics that we didn't ask you that you wanted to tell us before we move on?
I did my best to make all of the characters in the unit real people with their own backstory. didn't get a chance to explore all of them. And of course, some of them didn't survive naturally. So I was hoping to go on with that to work out how Die Wolf is going to go on with his life, what he's going to do, because it's unlikely he will remain in the military forever, because the brass simply will not promote him into a position where he is in charge of large units, even if he has the ability, because he is a political hot potato and they cannot afford to get him killed. So he's unlikely going to get postings where he can show what he's made of. So I'll have to work out where I'm going to go with that.
Okay. So normally when rights transfers become an issue, like what you're talking about, when publishers fold or whatever, the audiobook rights eventually expire as well. So is the audiobook for this still out there?
The audiobook ought to be out there because Audible made a large buy some years ago, and I believe that's one of the ones that they bought. So I would have to check, but I think that was one of the ones that was purchased.
Otherwise, JR is going to have his mom read it to him.
Hey, I can read sometimes. I just like it when they do the voices.
I know. That's why you're going to have your mom do it, because I won't do it.
I bet if I paid you enough, you'd read too. All right. So this is the part of the interview, dear listener, where we remind you that as readers, your thoughts matter. So please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. And rumor has it, when an author gets 100 reviews, they get a unicorn. And like I say every time, I, for one, would like to know what a unicorn steak tastes like. So, Doc, are you putting A1 on your steak, or are you going to put the ketchup on your unicorn steak? How are you going to cook yours?
I didn't know that it had to be a dead unicorn. Can it be a live one?
I mean, come on. You get an exotic animal, you're not going to see what it tastes like a steak? I ate camel, for crying out loud.
That's not an exotic animal.
It is when you're from the burbs. All right. She's looking at us weird, Doc, so we'll have to move on. So, Jody, can you tell listeners how they can find you?
Well, my website is currently being renovated, so you can look for me on Facebook. I have an Amazon page. I've just started up an Instagram page, so I have to post pictures of my cats. And
as you do,
they're pleasing cats.
As you do. That's right, my beautiful kitties. So and find me at various conventions.
So now we got to get her like spectacles for the cats so they can sit there reading books and like, just to pose them more properly. What, Doc? Okay. Don't judge me.
Cats absorb information in different ways. I had a cat who would sit on almost any kind of communication form, including the answering machine, which she could activate with her butt.
Oh my!
Oh my! Yeah. All right.
We could hear it erupt from the other room and start reading off messages, and that meant that Cassie was sitting on it.
All right. And dear listener, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, SF_fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We promise we read and answer them. You can send all hate mail to Cisca at blastersandbladespodcast.com. You can join us on our website, which is anchor.fm/blasters-tech-and-tech-blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades. You can also support us there on a reoccurring basis, much like a Patreon model. You can also support the show by participating in, I almost forgot, the Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades podcast, where all the shenanigans happen. And we try to cure Cisca of her perversions of putting pineapples on pizza. Das ist verboten. You can also support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. And be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast. I promise I will keep Doc Cisca and Nick Garber duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders.
Never surrender. Except for Nick. He just passes out.
Yeah, but you know. Oh, and we've been meaning to tell you, we didn't mention it at the end of season 1 episode, but we are looking into the process of getting an actual proper grown-up looking website. But for now, anchor.fm, the link there is free and it links to everything else. But we are looking at the feasibility of an actual proper website. Apparently Doc knows people who know people, so we're gonna try to make that happen.
I know people? Yes, I do. And then I know you.
Why do I feel like I was just insulted?
Good, you're learning. Oh, sorry. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick, Garber, J.R. Handley, I'm Cisca. This was a Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week. Same time, same place, same chaos. Love it, indulging our love. Nerd culture, cheesy jokes, all things that go boom, pineapple on pizza, and of course, making JR cry.
I never cry. I just
Yes,
cut onions
all the
on
time.
allergy season. All right, don't lie
Anytime
to
you see
them.
pineapple on pizza.
Because that's heresy. That's